Nathan Cooper slipped into Tech Nimbus as quietly as he would continue to navigate his years there, discreet, calm, and reserved. His demeanor made him easy to overlook. He showed little interest in office gossip, sidelong glances, or veiled remarks. Yet beneath the surface, something profound simmered, a complexity he kept hidden. Tech Nimbus, one of the largest tech firms in the United States, was helmed by leaders blissfully unaware of the potential Nathan possessed. In stark contrast, John Parker burst into meetings like a tempest, his presence commanding attention from afar. With his blonde hair, fair complexion, and a smile that seemed crafted to evoke both admiration and trepidation, John inspired both fear and respect. He had ascended through the company's hierarchy with astonishing speed, leading aggressive expansion initiatives and cutting departments he deemed ineffective. His approach was merciless, yet to the board, it yielded results. "So the next step is the merger," John declared in one meeting, disregarding Nathan, who sat quietly at the table. "We need to finalize this deal with the Chinese company by the end of the quarter. If anyone isn't prepared to move forward, you're free to leave now." Nathan listened intently, maintaining his silence, fully aware of what was to come. John, as always, paid little heed to those outside his inner circle. To him, Nathan was merely another employee, a quiet black man who, by chance, had landed a position at the company, but whose insights were hardly worth consideration. "Anything to add, Cooper?" John's tone dripped with condescension. Nathan merely shook his head. He understood the dynamics all too well. He knew that any contribution he made would either be dismissed or distorted, making silence the wiser choice, at least for the moment. When the meeting wrapped up, John and the other directors departed for an exclusive lunch Nathan wasn't invited to. In fact, he was seldom included in the company's social gatherings. John orchestrated events, dinners, and meetings where only a select few were invited. It was no secret he preferred a circle of elite white males around him. For Nathan, this was nothing new. He observed their exit before leaning back in his chair and surveying the now vacant room. He lingered there for a few more moments, aware that another meeting loomed. But his thoughts drifted back to other instances of exclusion and neglect. When he first joined Tech Nimbus, Nathan had clung to the belief that diligence and patience would eventually earn him respect. Just a few months into his tenure, he encountered John's casual indifference. Nathan proposed a strategy to streamline the company's operations, a well-thought-out plan that could save millions in operational expenses. However, without a glance in his direction, John laughed dismissively, shaking his head as he returned to his own agenda, treating Nathan as if he were invisible. "Anyone else have any useful ideas?" John sneered, condescension dripping from his voice. The room fell silent, and an oppressive embarrassment enveloped Nathan as he slumped back in his chair, swallowing his humiliation. No one defended him then. Nathan had once believed in the company's meritocratic ideals, convinced that respect would accrue over time and through tangible results. Yet, as the months rolled on, it became increasingly evident that to people like John, someone like Nathan was inconsequential. Regardless of his contributions, the color of his skin shaped their perception of him. He understood that these slights weren't mere oversights or typical corporate maneuvering. They were part of a broader, more insidious pattern of exclusion. Despite his composed exterior, Nathan bore the weight of countless microaggressions that had accumulated over time. Yet, he never retaliated, never gave anyone the satisfaction of witnessing him lose control. Over the years, he learned that reacting to such insults would only reinforce the narrative that he didn't belong. So he bided his time. Rachel Kim, the marketing manager, also recognized this troubling pattern. Relatively new to the upper management echelon, she possessed a keen eye for detail and an intuitive grasp of people's motives. She had observed John's dismissive treatment of Nathan and initially assumed it was simply a reflection of John's authoritarian leadership style. But as she continued to observe these interactions, Rachel began to suspect that something deeper was at play. John didn't dismiss Nathan merely due to his role within the company. He ignored him because he didn't believe someone like Nathan had anything valuable to contribute, perhaps influenced by his race. Rachel had witnessed meetings where Nathan's ideas were brushed aside as John barreled through with his agenda, disregarding any consideration of alternatives. This behavior irked her, yet she had always kept her distance from the conflict. After all, John wielded power, and Rachel wasn't yet in a position to challenge him, not yet anyway. After the meeting, as Nathan collected his belongings, Rachel cautiously approached him. She paused momentarily, uncertain if she should speak up. "Nathan," she said softly, her voice breaking the room's silence. He looked up at her, his expression neutral. "Rachel," he replied, maintaining his calm demeanor. "I couldn't help but notice how John rushed through the merger plan, even with some apparent risks involved," she said, her tone measured. "It seems like no one is truly questioning the numbers, but there's a lot on the line." Nathan studied her for a moment. He recognized Rachel's intelligence. She had ascended quickly within the department, much like John, but she possessed a quality that set her apart. She wasn't reckless, and unlike John, she didn't seem intent on curating an exclusive circle of influence. "You're right," Nathan said quietly. "There are risks, and it appears John is unconcerned." Rachel raised an eyebrow. "Doesn't that bother you? He's pushing something that could backfire spectacularly." Nathan leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. "It bothers me," he admitted, still maintaining his serene tone. "But I've learned that sometimes it's necessary to wait for the right moment to speak up." Rachel didn't fully grasp his meaning, but she nodded, sensing there was more beneath the surface. She had never witnessed Nathan openly challenge anyone at the company. Yet, she sensed he understood the organization's dynamics far better than most realized. As Rachel exited the room, she couldn't shake the feeling that Nathan was an enigma, quiet and reserved, yet undeniably someone who should not be underestimated. Nathan lingered in the empty conference room for a few more minutes. He had maintained his silence for years, allowing individuals like John to trample over him while he observed from the shadows as they made decisions that would shape the company's future. Yet, a shift hung in the air, and Nathan could sense it. The arrogance and exclusion that John embodied were approaching a breaking point, and when that moment arrived, Nathan vowed not to remain silent any longer. It was as if Rachel had, for the first time, grasped the real game being played within Tech Nimbus. John Parker was moving too rapidly with the merger, and she recognized that it could lead to disaster for the company. She wanted to believe someone would identify the risks before it was too late, but as she analyzed the company's dynamics, her confidence wavered. Nathan Cooper's reticence on the issue piqued her curiosity. Though he wasn't one to speak frequently, when he did, his words carried a distinct weight. Now, after hearing his brief response, Rachel was convinced that Nathan possessed far more knowledge than he was willing to reveal. That evening, while reviewing the financial reports related to the merger, Rachel resolved she needed answers. She pondered what Nathan truly understood about the situation and why he seemed so unfazed by the mounting pressure. The next day, during a break between meetings, she approached him again, hesitating. "Before you speak, Nathan, can I ask you something?" she began as he readied to leave the room. Nathan turned to her, his eyes calm yet alert. "Sure, Rachel, what do you need?" She took a deep breath, striving to gather her thoughts. "I know you're someone who observes a lot but rarely intervenes, and honestly, I admire that. You seem to have a knack for knowing the right moment to speak up. But this merger..." She hesitated, unsure how to phrase her concern. "Do you think we're heading in the right direction? Because, to me, it seems like John is overlooking the risks." Nathan studied her for a moment, as if weighing her intentions before he replied. "I believe he is overlooking many risks," he finally admitted. "But people in positions of power often do just that. They surround themselves with those who tell them what they want to hear. They don't question, they don't reflect, and eventually, the consequences catch up with them." Rachel bit her lip, a wave of frustration washing over her. "So why doesn't anyone do anything? Why doesn't anyone try to stop him?" Nathan let out a small sigh and stepped closer to her. "The answers aren't always straightforward. We can't always act immediately. Sometimes it's necessary to wait for the right moment to arise, and when it does, you must be ready to act." Rachel nodded, though she was still unsatisfied with his response. "But while we wait, he's putting the company at risk," she pointed out, a hint of exasperation creeping into her voice. Nathan offered a faint smile, an almost imperceptible acknowledgement. "I understand your frustration, Rachel, and you're right to be concerned. But trust me when I say this is a long game. Things will shift, just keep your eyes open." She left the conversation feeling torn between relief and worry. Nathan clearly held more knowledge than he was revealing, but what was he waiting for? When would John cross a line? Rachel walked away with more questions than answers, but one thing was clear: she was determined to uncover the truth about what was unfolding at Tech Nimbus. In the days that followed, Rachel began to scrutinize the details she had previously overlooked. She noticed how the directors closest to John conducted themselves in meetings, how they sidestepped questioning him and consistently agreed with his decisions. It was as if everyone feared going against John, even when they were aware of the risks he was taking. This behavior puzzled Rachel. Tech Nimbus wasn't a small firm, and any misstep could cost millions and impact the lives of thousands of employees. She also observed how Nathan remained in the background, always vigilant but never intervening. He was a steady presence, silent, as if he were awaiting something. Rachel found herself increasingly captivated by him, trying to decipher his motives. What did he know? Why didn't he step in, especially now that the merger was on the horizon? One afternoon, as Rachel worked in her office, Nathan appeared at her door. "Do you have a minute?" he asked, his voice as calm as ever. Rachel nodded, surprised that he had sought her out. He stepped inside and closed the door behind him, then approached her desk and took a seat in the chair across from her. "I've noticed your concerns about the merger," he began, "and I can assure you, you're not alone. Many of us here share the same apprehensions." Rachel looked at him, waiting for him to elaborate. "But there's something you need to know," Nathan said, leaning forward slightly. "There's a reason John is pushing so aggressively for this merger, and it's not because he believes it's the best course for the company." She frowned. "What do you mean?" Nathan fell silent for a moment, as if weighing how much he could disclose. "John is committed to other interests. This merger will serve him personally, but it puts Tech Nimbus at significant risk. He's playing a dangerous game, and we are merely his pawns." Rachel felt a knot tighten in her stomach. "So why doesn't anyone do anything?" she asked, her frustration boiling over. "If we know he's acting out of self-interest, why are we allowing this to unfold?" Nathan met her gaze, his eyes filled with calculated patience. "Because people like John are exceptionally skilled at concealing their true motives. Others like us are waiting for the right moment to act." A chill ran down Rachel's spine. It was evident that Nathan held knowledge beyond what he had shared. He possessed a profound understanding of the company's dynamics and the power struggles at play. Yet what intrigued her most was the calmness with which he approached all of this. It was as if he were always 2 steps ahead, perpetually waiting, perpetually calculating. In the days that followed, Rachel noticed a subtle shift in the unfolding events. John continued to advocate for the merger, but the tension in the atmosphere became increasingly palpable. Rumors began to swirl, and unease grew among the staff. Nathan, however, remained unflustered, as if he anticipated something monumental was about to occur. He recognized this as his opportunity to crown his career with a billion-dollar deal that would forever alter Tech Nimbus's trajectory. Yet, in recent weeks, the atmosphere within the company had shifted. There was a rising restlessness among employees and board members, as if everyone was poised for something he couldn't quite identify. John, however, remained oblivious to this undercurrent. He was singularly focused on securing the deal, ensuring the board rallied behind his vision of aggressive growth. In his mind, there was no room for hesitation or doubt. He was right, and nothing would deter him from achieving his goal. On the day of the final meeting, the room was filled with key directors and shareholders. Everyone was gathered to hear the final merger proposal, including Nathan, who occupied his usual spot at the end of the table. Quietly observing, John began his presentation with his signature charisma and confidence, projecting charts, explaining figures, and discussing the promising future that awaited Tech Nimbus post-merger. To many in the room, the proposal appeared solid as always, yet something felt different in the atmosphere. The board seemed more cautious, as if something was holding them back. When John concluded his speech, an uncomfortable silence enveloped the room. He had expected praise and enthusiastic support, but the silence that followed left him visibly tense. It was then that Nathan, from the far side of the room, finally stood up. "Before we vote," he said, his voice calm yet firm, "I believe there's something we all need to consider." John looked at him, a mixture of confusion and irritation on his face. Why was Nathan speaking now after months of silence? "Please, Nathan," John replied, barely disguising his disdain. "If you have something to contribute, go ahead." Nathan walked toward the center of the room, his posture impeccable and unhurried, exuding an air of complete control. He met John's gaze directly before continuing. "I've been at Tech Nimbus for many years, and during that time, I've observed how decisions are made and who makes them." His voice carried a calmness that sharply contrasted with the tension in the room. "But what many of you may not know is that I am the largest shareholder in this company. I inherited my shares from my family, who always believed in this company's potential. I chose to remain silent all this time to see how decisions were made without my influence being felt." The room froze. No one had anticipated this revelation. John, who until that moment had seemed untouchable, looked at Nathan in stunned disbelief, unsure of how to respond. Nathan continued, unfazed by the evident surprise on John's and the other directors' faces. "What we've witnessed in recent months is a clear example of what happens when power is concentrated in the hands of those who don't have the company's best interests at heart. The merger John proposed," he paused, fixing his gaze directly on the man in front of him, "isn't just risky. It has been manipulated to serve personal interests at the expense of the financial health of everyone here." John began to stammer something in response, but Nathan cut him off. "The financial projections presented are doctored," he stated coldly. "Someone within the company, one of the board members, manipulated the numbers to ensure this merger would be approved, fully aware that it would lead us to disaster." The room fell utterly silent. All eyes were fixed on Nathan, who now stood as an unexpected figure of authority. "And who is that person?" someone from the far end of the table asked. Nathan held John's gaze for a long moment before replying, "I'm not here to make direct accusations, but it's clear who stands to gain the most from this merger." The impact of his words reverberated through the room like a bomb, prompting board members to murmur among themselves, the tension escalating with each passing second. John attempted to defend himself, but his arguments felt weak and insignificant in light of the evidence presented. Nathan presented with an air of authority, yet he felt cornered. The same individuals who had backed him unconditionally just days earlier now regarded him with skepticism. The merger, once seen as a fait accompli, began to unravel before his eyes as Nathan continued to outline the associated risks and John's errors. Rachel observed the unfolding drama with a blend of relief and admiration. Nathan had finally shattered his silence in a manner that no one had anticipated. John's true colors were being exposed, and the merger teetered on the brink of cancellation. When Nathan concluded his address, an unsettling silence enveloped the room. Doubts about John's leadership had surfaced, leaving no question regarding who now held the reins. The ambitious plan John had envisioned as the crowning achievement of his career was disintegrating right in front of him. He realized his reputation lay in ruins, and that it was only a matter of time before the board would demand his resignation. However, he was not prepared to surrender just yet. He needed to devise a strategy to salvage his position and reclaim control. In the days that followed, Tech Nimbus entered a transitional phase. Nathan, now prominently recognized as the largest shareholder and an emerging leader within the company, began to adopt a more proactive approach. He convened meetings with key departments and instigated a thorough reassessment of the company's strategy. His methods differed significantly from John's. He fostered a culture of inclusion, actively listening to voices that had previously gone unheard, such as Rachel's, who now stood by his side, collaborating to shape Tech Nimbus's future. Rachel, impressed by Nathan's adept handling of the situation, saw her own career advance rapidly. She was elevated to marketing director, gaining increased influence and responsibility while working directly with Nathan. Together, they began crafting strategies to transform Tech Nimbus into a more innovative, ethical, and inclusive organization. Meanwhile, John found himself compelled to request a private meeting with Nathan. He recognized that his only chance for redemption within the company hinged on this moment, despite the public humiliation that still stung. "Nathan, I need a second chance," he implored, desperation evident in his voice. "I've made mistakes, but I can learn from them. I want to be part of this company's future." Nathan scrutinized him for a moment before responding. "John, you've had numerous opportunities over the years. You chose to disregard the voices that truly mattered and to exclude individuals who could have been invaluable to you. Now you must demonstrate that you've learned from this experience." John swallowed hard, acutely aware that this was the best offer he would receive. "I'm willing to prove myself. Just tell me what I need to do." Nathan shook his head slowly. "I'll place you on probation. During this period, I want you to reconsider your attitudes and decisions. You will work on smaller projects and report directly to me. If I observe any genuine change, we can discuss your future here." John nodded, though internally he seethed with anger and frustration. He detested the thought of submitting to Nathan, but he understood he had no alternative. Meanwhile, one last threat loomed on the horizon. Michael, another ambitious executive who had always coveted John's position, recognized that his moment to act had arrived. He had spent the past few weeks quietly observing everything from a distance, and now that John was weakened and Nathan had taken control, he began to devise a new scheme. Michael knew he had to tread carefully. He couldn't afford to make the same blatant missteps as John. Instead, he began to sow rumors and stir suspicions about how Nathan had attained power, suggesting that perhaps Nathan had orchestrated the situation to his advantage from the outset. A new battle for control of Tech Nimbus was imminent, but for the time being, Nathan was focused on the task of rebuilding the company. Under his leadership, Tech Nimbus began to embrace more inclusive and transparent policies. He launched several initiatives to ensure that all employees, regardless of their position, had a voice in the company's direction. As Tech Nimbus evolved, the voices of individuals from all backgrounds began to resonate in the company's decision-making processes. The corporate culture gradually shifted, reflecting a more inclusive and collaborative environment. Rachel, now a prominent figure within the organization, felt a renewed sense of purpose under Nathan's leadership. His vision was transformative, steering the company toward a future where innovation and diversity thrived. Yet, she remained acutely aware of the hurdles still looming on the horizon, particularly with figures like Michael, who seemed intent on undermining progress. However, for the first time, Rachel felt that her insights and contributions were genuinely valued. The stakes for Tech Nimbus were high, and the internal power dynamics remained a constant challenge. Still, with Nathan at the forefront, there was a palpable sense of hope, a belief that the company was on the cusp of becoming the flourishing, inclusive space it had always aspired to be, where every employee could grow and realize their potential.